Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about what is properly called the linguistic turn in philosophy. Um, when I say the linguistic turn, I'm mostly looking towards the analytic tradition. Um, if we want to go to the continental tradition, we can think about Jacques Derrida. Some people that are, you know, following this period of time. When I'm talking about the linguistic turn, I'm thinking about like 20s, like early 20s, late 19 teens, and then into the movement of the Vienna Circle and logical positivism. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I'm currently taking a class where that's basically what we've been talking about is logical positivism, and we're kind of moving past that into 1950 and onward. So I thought I would just at some point I'm going to make videos which are about each of the main, or about some of the main articles of this movement. I've done a video about G.E. Moore's Intro of Sense Data and Russell's Hard and Soft Data, which is kind of the beginning of that. Then what follows, I also did a video on the Vienna Circle, and then what follows from that is this big movement called, what is commonly called in philosophy, logical positivism. So why is this called the linguistic turn? What is meant here is that prior to the people I'm thinking about is Rudolf Carnap, Moritz Schlick. These people include, there's Karl Hempel, Friedrich Waismann. They're inspired by Wittgenstein, and it has a lot to do with Ernst Mach. Bertrand Russell was a big part of the influencing of this movement here in his writings. So basically, it's like, but prior to Russell and Frege, prior to those guys, prior and somewhat, during, we have these different kinds of metaphysics. In modern philosophy, we have the rationalists and the empiricists. The rationalists have the metaphysics about the soul, the mind, and God. Or the soul, the world, and God. When that's what Kant critiqued, and the rationalists are talking about Leibniz, Descartes, Spinoza maybe, but then the empiricists are like Locke, Hume, Berkeley, those guys. So then we have 19th century. We had Kant, of course. Then we had 19th century of Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, those guys, and then the neo-Kantians like Schultz and Beck and those guys. But this is what these linguistic term people are terming metaphysics. They're out to destroy and hate on metaphysics, but it's a good thing in that it's trying to, instead of talking about the world as such, we're going to talk first about what does this talk we're talking about mean? What does this mean? What are the words that we're using mean? So Rudolf Carnap, in his article, The Elimination of Metaphysics Through Logical Analysis, he basically, quotes Heidegger's Was ist Metaphysik, and he, gives this quote where he, if you were on the analytic side of philosophy, you would not know what the hell he means. But if you are conditioned in the continental thing, you would have a good idea, also via secondary sources on Heidegger. But basically what I'm saying is that he, and then it extends to people who do philosophy via pseudo statements. What does Carnap mean by a pseudo statement? Either a sentence which has a word in it which has been erroneously believed to have meaning, or a sentence which is made up out of meaningful words, but are put together counter-syntactically, against the rules of logical syntax, not grammatical syntax. And in that paper, Carnot makes a distinction between grammatical and logical syntax. Now, when I do the video on that article, then I will talk about that more. And then in Russell's Hard and Soft Data, which is in his book, Our Knowledge of the External World, he makes a difference between language of common sense, or thing language, or in language of sense data, where if I have the blue spectacles on, which is what the name of my channel is, if I have those on and I'm looking at this remote, and it's blue, it's not white, it's blue because I have the blue glasses on, I wonder, why is this blue? And in thing language, I'd be like, oh, because there's a intervening medium. But in sense data language, we would say we'd have to correlate a certain touch space. I would touch the lenses. We have to correlate a certain part of touch space with sight space. So I would have to touch the lens and put my hand outside of it in order to correlate the two. But it all boils down to, what do we mean by when we say such and such? So, and then in Carnot's paper, Empiricism, Semantics, and Ontology, he kind of does things a little bit different, because logical positivism has kind of gone down because we don't have that good of a reductive translation between the thing language and the sense data language. So we don't really have that really good of stuff going on. So logical positivism is kind of going, it's kind of just going down a little bit. So in this era, the linguistic turn is about what the words we use mean. So, if we're a Berkeley-style idealist, or a Schopenhauer idealist, then we have to define certain statements which are of a certain kind in order to move up to certain other statements to figure out what these words designate. So we have to, in Carnot's 1950 article, he's like, well, you can talk in any certain way, but you have to, I guess, give an idea of what it means to say X. So it boils down to what we mean, and if we figure out what the words we use mean, then we can figure out what the world is. Then we can, have a certain kind of metaphysics. Because even though the logical positivists, are hating on and trying to destroy metaphysics, they're still doing a form of metaphysics which doesn't use pseudo statements that in the Carnot sense. They don't use meaningless words and counter-syntactically formed sentences. And then we have the big issue of protocol sentences, and as to how those factor into the whole picture of the build-up of knowledge. Because the whole shtick there is truth conditions equal justification conditions equal verification conditions equals meaning conditions. So that's what all that is. So it all boils down to, if we can figure out what this means, if what a certain thing means, then we can figure out how to go about, normally what will happen is a certain theory of truth, though Mort Schlick would not really like to call it a theory, because it's not a scientific theory, it's some other kind of theory, but you would figure out what truth means, but it has to do with what our words mean. And if we don't really look at that, if we try to ignore what our words mean, then according to these guys, it's not gonna. Then our structure of knowledge doesn't really worked that well. So yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about this stuff, and maybe in a few months I'll continue and make a video about Carnot. But I just kind of want my I'm taking a class called Theory of Knowledge, which is about epistemology, and I want to let this class be done with. So maybe I'll do it in the month of May or April or such.